Fala Dev, tudo bom? Aqui é o Pedro Duarte da Be Free Academy e esse é o nosso segundo episódio do Be Free Cast. Hoje eu bato um papo com o George Collier, fundador da Not Quite Unicorns, uma agência Bubble de maior crescimento da história. Em um ano e meio eles saíram de zero para uma agência Gold Tier. Conheci o George ano passado na BubbleCon, se tornou um bom amigo e um cara que eu admiro demais. Espero que essa conversa te ajude de alguma forma. O nosso papo foi em inglês, então perdoem ali às vezes o inglês meio mais ou menos. E você pode escolher a opção de legenda de português ou inglês para, enfim, aproveitar da melhor forma possível o conteúdo da nossa conversa. Então é isso, espero que você goste, uma horinha de papo, acaba rapidinho e eu tenho certeza que vai te ajudar. Um abraço. Hi guys, this is Pedro from Be Free Academy. This is our first Be Free Cast episode in English. And I'm very thrilled to chat one of the no-code trailblazer who's redefining what's possible in the Bubble ecosystem. I met George at BubbleCon last year, where we didn't just share an apartment, but spent hours geeking out over no-code's future, Bubble's engine. And at just 21, George has built Not Quite Unicorns, one of the fastest growing no-code agencies. He's a Bubble ambassador. He's a member of the Certification Advisory Committee. And after a YouTube stardom to leading a low-code revolution, his story is as inspiring as unconventional. And I'm really glad to have you here, George. Thanks for coming. And yeah, please introduce yourself.
Thanks. I'm so grateful to be here. My name's George. Normally you find me on the Bubble forum or on X or something. I've been doing Bubble for about 2.5 years now. I started it essentially in late 2022, during a time where AI started becoming more common. And I did it because I wanted to build my own tools. That's how I started, and that's how I imagine a lot of you guys got started. I started Bubble because I wanted to build my own things and I didn't want to pay other people to do it. So that's how I got to know Bubble. And then, from being public about what I'm doing, I started getting leads, people wanting to work with me, mainly from the forum. And eventually that grew into agency work. And just a few months ago, we became the youngest gold tier agency. It took us just 18 months to get there, which is pretty cool because most of them are kind of 5 years old. And we've also released 2 cool tools for the Bubble community, both of which are free right now. The first of those is basically Thank You Secure. It allows you to security audit any apps that you built for free, so that before you deliver it to anyone or launch your own app, you can make sure that it's really secure. And the other one released just a few days ago, and it's called BuildPrint, and it lets you document your entire Bubble app in whatever language you choose and chat with your Bubble app. So if you want to understand how it works, if you forgot how you built something, then it's really useful to kind of understand where you are.
Yeah, this is amazing, and both tools are incredible. I remember when you first shown me what you were looking at on Bubble's JSON file and its internal API calls, its infrastructure, and it was mind-blowing to me. Kind of uncovering this, opening the hood of Bubble's engine. And just a little before we dive into this more Bubble technical subject, I'm very curious to hear more from you about how you moved from a 1+ million subscribers YouTube channel, music YouTube channel, to creating a no-code agency. What sparked this pivot, or how Bubble appeared on this?
It's kind of weird. For context, I have a large YouTube channel still, which has about 1 million subscribers on YouTube. You can just search my name and that's probably what comes up. But I started this completely unrelated, and I started it in my first year of university. I'm based in the UK. I was at university for the last few years. I technically still am, but I kind of transitioned from focusing mainly on YouTube, began outsourcing all of that so that I had more time to invest into this, which I found more enjoyable. And I felt like I could deliver more value doing this whilst keeping that running in the background. So it's a nice little trivia fact, I think, that I also have a big YouTube following. Don't know to what extent that's affected my Bubble development journey.
Yeah, and it's fun because I played the guitar, the bass, but not professionally, very just just at home with friends, and now to my son. But it's interesting because we never connect being a developer, which is that geeky thing, with being a musician. And if I didn't know it was you, I would never guess that George Collier
It's the same guy.
You know, were you?
Yeah, a lot of people say that because I meet people sometimes in all sorts of places. One of the Bubble engineers, I was chatting with him at BubbleCon, and then I connected with him on Slack a bit later, and it was like I was a couple of beers away from asking you if you were the same guy from YouTube. So it's interesting.
Yeah, definitely. Also, another thing that's always on my mind is about the name of your agency, Not Quite Unicorns. I think it's intriguing because, I don't know, the ethos before Not Quite, it kind of passes a message, but I would love to hear from you.
Yeah, so originally the company was, I registered the company because I had a lot of different kind of micro SaaS tools, and I needed them to be under a company just for tax and compliance, basically. And I called that company Not Quite Unicorns because a unicorn refers to $1 billion company. And those tools were, well, not quite unicorns, but maybe one day, who knows. And then I stuck with that for the agency, and people liked it because it's fairly memorable. It's a bit different. We're fairly pragmatic as an agency. And yeah, I'm pretty happy with the brand. I'm glad people like it, but that's the context behind the original name.
Yeah. On my perspective, this Not Quite Unicorn, the way it resonates to me, it's more like you don't need to be perfect.
That's also it.
You know, you can do with what you have in hand. You don't need to be flawless.
Yeah, that's the thing. Like all the people we work with, 99% of the way is fine. You can just launch your product, see how it goes. And then we'll take it from there. Don't take it so seriously. And we'll see what we can do with it.
Yeah. Cool. Awesome. And maybe in the future you could update the name to Not Yet Unicorns.
Almost. Yeah. Cool.
Yeah. And just one last thing before we maybe jump into more technical subjects in our episode is, I remember when we were chatting on WhatsApp before in BubbleCon, and you asked, hey, do you know if in New York City people under 21 can enter bars? And we didn't understand the question because also we would never guess that you were under 21 at the time. So at 21, you've achieved what many spend decades chasing. I mean, what's driven you to move so fast, and how you balance ambition, burnout, personal life? I mean,
yeah. I mean, I think mainly I'm just not too afraid of, you just got to give things a go. You can do whatever you want, and the barrier to entry for these things is so low now. There's very little cost if you want to become a freelancer or start an agency, because it's 2025. You don't need a physical premises. The legal costs of registering a business, and you might not even have to do that, are very low. So there's no harm in just giving it a go. The worst that can happen is it doesn't work and you do something else, and that's fine. And the other thing is that it doesn't have to be perfect from day one. Like, I know for me, for example, if I see our agency's monthly recurring revenue not growing as fast as a previous month, it can feel not as great because you expect it to continue every month. But when you put it into perspective and realize that other agencies are happy to grow in a year the same size that you're growing in a month, then it's actually fine. So compare yourself to everything that you know, rather than comparing yourself to other people and what you see online. I think is the most important thing. The other thing is just to make sure that you only do what you want to do. The benefit and the thing that I like about what I do now is that I can work from wherever I want. I can work whenever I want, and I can do as much or as little as I want. If I want to build something like Build Prints, I can spend more time doing that and not take on as much client work and share it out to my team more, which is a great amount of flexibility and something that I'm really grateful for.
Amazing. Yeah, I loved what you just said. We are indeed maybe at the best time in history to try things.
There's very little harm in trying things, or at least trying things for yourself. Don't use clients that are paying you as test projects. But in terms of trying things out and seeing how they go, I would say that's the most important thing. And don't be afraid of if it goes wrong, because it's not the end of the world.
Cool. Awesome. Yeah. Great outcome. Maybe moving to a more technical side now. Your security audit tool has ran security checkups in thousands of apps now. I don't know, maybe the last number I saw you shared something like this, it was maybe over 18,000 bubble apps, or I don't know, 1,800. I'm not.
I think 1,800. I've done a couple of stuff. So NQ Secure, the only apps that it's audited are the ones that people have added. So it's more like that range. But I've also audited basically every app that I can find in the ecosystem. So I have a database of kind of 20,000 bubble apps that are all live. And there are basic checks and scans that I can do on all of them to kind of see security patterns in the ecosystem, which is pretty cool.
Yeah. Where do you see the industry heading in the next 3 to 5 years after diving so deep into the market? And we are surrounded by vibe coding, tiny objects all around, and I don't know, I have a perspective, but we never know if we are right or wrong, or if we are at least cohesive to reality. So where do you see it going to in the next few years?
I think I'll start off by saying I'm not totally sure, and I think that's okay. It's hard to know where these things will go. But I think that AI-assisted coding will eventually be good for Bubble. I think there's some platform risk that maybe Bubble falls behind and other things. But what I would say is I built Build Prints 50% because I wanted to explore AI-assisted coding. Not quite vibe coding, because I think it's important to know everything that's going on in an app. But what I would say with vibe coding is that English isn't a programming language. English is non-deterministic. When you vibe code with AI, there's basically a probability range of outcomes. So when you do it, a lot can happen, and it may not always be exactly what you expect. So I think to be able to vibe code effectively, you also have to understand code and be able to understand how systems integrate. Now, what Bubble does for us is it abstracts away all of that code so that you can just think about logic rather than syntax. So we don't have to start writing out correctly formatted if statements in JavaScript. Instead, you can just write it in words using the expression editor, which is really powerful. And the other thing with Bubble is that as long as your logic is valid, everything will just work, because scaling is handled for you, security is handled for you if you set up the correct privacy rules and workflow permissions. Whereas with AI-assisted coding, you don't get that benefit. You don't have that kind of managed infrastructure. So whilst you may be able to create a micro tool, if you don't understand how everything integrates in the code base that you've created, you're likely going to struggle to firstly scale it in terms of number of users, and then also scale it in terms of features. So what I would say is I still think it's worth learning Bubble. I would also say it's probably worth exploring AI-assisted coding. But if you are doing AI-assisted coding, I would say the most important thing is really to make sure that you understand what's being written. Think about it in a Bubble way as well. What you'll find if you try it is that a lot of ideas from Bubble port themselves one-to-one directly to developing a code base. For example, reusable elements are components in React, for example, that you can just reuse entirely. So commonly used logic, you'll want to consolidate. And And workflows, for example, might be server actions in Next.js. If you're going to do AI-assisted coding, make sure you know exactly what's happening. For the next 5 years, I don't know exactly what's going to happen. As an agency, for now, we only work on Bubble. And if Bubble doesn't become the best option, then we'll happily pivot. But I still think it's the best option for most apps, just because of kind of that bigger picture, combining lots of different systems together, perspective of Bubble.
Yeah, I loved your perspective. It's very relates a lot to mine, because I agree with you. Maybe the biggest mistake or misconception or misunderstanding, I don't know the best word to describe it, but the biggest issue I see on no-code developers is that most of the no-code developer community comes from a non-technical background, and they don't understand that they need to learn how to think programmatically.
Exactly. I mean, you have to think like an engineer, because being a software engineer is not just being able to code.
Yes.
Being a Bubble developer is about understanding the big picture of a system and how things relate together. You don't have to worry about the code. Bubble will take care of that for you, but you need to understand logic and be able to think like an engineer that understands exactly how everything ties together.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah, I usually say that generating code isn't programming. Both are different things. And what we do when we work with Bubble or any other no-code, low-code tool is that we open more room in our brains to think on programming and logic and algorithms, optimization, business rules, instead of just being worried about curly brackets and commas. Awesome. Yeah. Following on this, what in your point of view is the biggest misconception that founders have about no-code capabilities? I mean, we are constantly asked by clients and non-technical founders if they can trust no-code to build their products.
Yeah. I'd say the biggest thing is no-code is not no work. It still takes time to do these things. It's an order of magnitude quicker. But it takes a lot of time still, because fundamentally there's a lot to do. You cannot just, wave a wand and then your app appears in front of you. Bubble wants to do that. I don't think they're there yet. But the other thing I would say as well is, can it scale? People are worried about not being able to scale, or like, I can't self-host my Bubble app. But I don't think that's actually as big of a problem as founders think. Because if you're worried about not being able to self-host your Bubble app because in 3 years your app is going to have 1 million users, I think you're a step ahead of yourself. I think if you've got to 100,000 users and Bubble is causing problems, which I don't think it should be if your app is well built, then you can afford a rebuild. So you're kind of planning for a problem that doesn't exist yet. And the other thing is, with self-hosting Bubble, why would you want to do that? Bubble handles everything for you. It handles domains, database, backups, logs. I don't see why you would want to self-host that and take away all of the platform protections that Bubble affords you. Yes, like maybe reliability isn't perfect at the moment, but I can assure you it's better than if you only had yourself managing that system. So that's my take on Bubble.
Yeah, I often tell a story from my previous startup that we ran on top of a very regular stack with a MongoDB database, Node.js API, Next front for web, Flutter front for mobile. So everything was very up to date in terms of technology, and everything went really well. But two things. One, I had a $6,000 monthly bill with Azure for hosting, and it was okay. I had to pay for the engine to run my code. So it's part of the game. And people, especially here in Brazil, we have this currency parity issue. So maybe $35 is not as cheap as it is to American citizens or for you in England. But it's still very cheap if we compare with real hosting dedicated servers or VPS. And other thing is my startup suffered a DDoS attack, and it took us from Friday night to Sunday afternoon to put everything up and running again.
Yeah.
6 people working 24 hours for 3 days to fix this DDoS attack and make everything run again. And now when we have any infrastructure issues with Bubble server, at
least it's not me dealing with the problem.
Yeah, I just stand up, go grab a coffee or play with my son for 15 minutes and I know everything is going to be okay.
Exactly. You don't have to worry about things so much. And the other thing is, in terms of pricing, yes, objectively, it's so much more expensive than just buying your own kind of server. If you host your own virtual server from Hetzner or something, it'll cost you like $4 a month and you'll get 2 CPUs, 4 gigabytes of RAM. That's great. But that's not what the value of Bubble is. Like, you don't need to say, hey, this thing which costed me $100 in workload units would have only costed 10 cents to run on a serverless function. That doesn't matter, because actually the value of your time is likely worth even more than that. And the value of having someone else manage your platform for you is also so significant. So the one benefit that Workload does have, and I'm not a huge fan of the Workload system, to be clear, but the one benefit it does have is that for the most part, your app will cost the same per user, no matter how many users you have. So once you've launched, if you know that 100 users costs this much workload, then you know that 1,000 will cost 10 times as much, which makes it roughly pretty easy to work out exactly how much your app is going to cost. And I've rarely seen apps cost more than 10% of their revenue in workload. So it seems pretty good to me.
Yeah, it sounds like a fair deal to everybody.
Yeah. And on parity pricing, BuildPrint is going to have parity pricing. So if you're in Brazil, you'll be able to access a discounted price that will allow you to document any app for free, which should help you if you're a developer, if you're a freelancer, to be able to understand what you build and then deliver documentation to clients as well. So I hope that will be useful.
This is huge. I don't know if everybody's already aware on how big this is, especially for tools like Bubble, which is no code. So we don't have access to a GitHub or anything that would help us creating this documentation and this tracking this change log in a more precise way. So having tools such as BuildPrint and NQU security tools.
It's a bad name. I needed to change the name.
Especially for non-English speaking.
It's hard for me.
And I think I know the answer, but AI tools like BuildPrint that you've built and others that are around and that will still be launched. Do you believe that AI is supercharging no-code or disrupting no-code?
It's disrupting in a good way, I think. I think it's lit a fire under Bubble's ass because they realize they need to speed up and get stuff done. It's no secret that Bubble has a mountain of technical debt. They've got old code that needs to be replaced. That's what a lot of the team is working on this year. But I think it's a good thing. And Bubble is well positioned to take advantage of that because Bubble's language is such that if the logic that you write is valid, it will just work. All of your Bubble apps, they convert to JSON. You can export that in the general settings of your app. But if that logic is valid, it will work. You don't have to worry about integrating different backends, different front end, database, managing all of that. All the AI needs to do is write that logic, and if the logic works, it will work. And it's that simple, which is one reason that Bubble's pretty well positioned to take advantage of it. versus tools like Lovable or doing it yourself in Cursor. You have to integrate multiple different systems, and AI isn't very good at that yet. I'm sure it will change in the future. These things will always change, but that's one of the benefits that Bubble has. And the other thing is that all apps are built using the same JSON structure. So it means the community can put out tools like BuildPrint, which is basically chat with your Bubble app. It's the AI that Bubble wanted to release, but haven't done. So I built it myself. And you're only able to do that because every Bubble app can share the same tools, and all apps can take advantage of the same kind of community-made stuff.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, I see a lot of opportunities on this. I mean, as you said, the JSON structure is the same. So if I learn how to manipulate this JSON file, I can manipulate my whole project, and not only to create a documentation, but also to create new elements, create new pages, new workflows, new databases, and everything. So I can see a lot coming in a very short time.
I'm excited to see it.
Yeah, me too. And now, George, as we spoke in the beginning, your career is very unusual. I mean, you started this agency. I'm pretty sure that anyone here who's ever logged in Bubble's forum saw your name there. Even if they haven't opened any thread, it's very easy to see your name around. And this has become a pattern. I think you are every day there. I mean, it feels like you have some time blocks on your calendar dedicated to forum. And besides everything that comes with it, you have the chance to interact with several different developer skill levels and demands and problems and issues and etc. After this, I mean, what do you see? What do you define what do you check to validate if a developer is good, a senior developer, a skilled developer, or a mid developer, a junior developer?
I would say the biggest thing is, firstly, I would say what it's not. I don't think that your years of experience determine what level you're at. I think that you can have been a developer for 6 months and be better than someone that has done it for 5 years. And I know that because I've interviewed people like that. My agency only hires senior developers. That's not because junior developers are inherently bad. It's just because that's the way I prefer to manage the agency. But it means I get to work out, who really understands everything that's going on and who doesn't. The second thing is that it's also not just knowing the manual back to back. You can know everything about Bubble, but that also doesn't make you a senior developer. So if it's not that, then what is it? And I think it's a way of thinking. And it goes back to what we were talking about earlier, which is thinking like an engineer, thinking like someone who's trying to think for themselves in 3 months. So when I build a feature, I'm not just trying to build it so that it works. If it works, that's great. That's the bare minimum. But what I want to make sure is that every time I built a feature, that I've built it in the best way possible. And by best way, I mean most efficient and most maintainable. So most efficient, is it fast? Is it effective? Does it not cost too much workload? And then by maintainable, I mean, if I'm going to revisit this feature that I've just built in 3 months, in 6 months, is it going to be easy to change? Have I built my workflows and my pages in a way that it makes it really easy to change? So for example, am I using custom events frequently? So we have lots of AI apps, for example, and I recommend that every AI app has a custom event, which takes a model ID as a parameter, and then messages as a list, because you'll obviously store your messages in the database, and then use that to make an API call to be able to get responses from AI. And that might sound silly, but the reason is it means that you can use the same piece of logic everywhere in your app that you're calling AI, for example. So if you want to switch AI providers, you only have to do it once because all of your AI logic is flowing through this one custom event. And that makes it super easy to update, super easy to maintain.
Yeah, creating the connection also with what we were discussing about thinking like an agent. Custom events are functions, are pieces of logic.
They're really useful. They're functions. They are environment variables if you use them in the backend. They allow you to separate different parts of logic. And the other thing I would say, just as a general piece of advice, and of course it differs based on the app, but make use of the backend a lot. For example, I think every app needs a sign-up backend workflow so that you can just create a user account in the front end and then schedule this sign-up workflow, which does things like creating their billing account, maybe sending an email, so that it means that you don't have to have lots of different sign-up logic, because in your app, if you have a sign-up page and then an admin panel where they can invite people, and then a team panel where a team member can invite another team member, then you've suddenly got 3 different places they can sign up. But actually, most of the logic is the same, so it makes sense to channel that all through one piece of backend logic or a custom event.
Yeah, awesome. I'm loving that you're sharing these vices, because this is my daily basis. I don't know, it's almost like a prayer, that I'm constantly repeating to my students at Be Free Academy. The comparison I make usually to make it clear for them is, usually when you purchase a Bubble course, when you're learning the sign-up flow, it takes you a minute or two to sign in or sign up, because they just show you, hey, this is the design tab where you just drag and drop this element called input, this another one for the password, this another one is a button, and then you create this action, authentication, sign the user up, for example. It actually only takes a minute or two to build it. On my Bubble course, I take 3.5 hours to create the sign up flow, because we do it using reusable elements, custom events, backend workflows, manipulating URL paths to make the URL clear and friendly and everything. So working with no code is way faster than anything else, but it doesn't mean it needs to be done in any way.
I completely agree. I think the other thing I would say is that there are things which actually don't matter too much. So I look at lots of people's apps when I audit, and things that I don't care about too much are things like naming conventions. I think there are lots of good ways to have a naming convention. I don't think there is a best solution. I have preferences, but there's no perfect way to structure every app. Every app will have slightly different database structures, option set structures. But the one thing which I can tell, has this been done right, has this been done effectively, is how things are structured. As long as you follow basic conventions, it doesn't matter what your naming convention is, as long as it's a convention and I can tell roughly how it's organized and what relates to what, then it's good. But with logic and reusable logic, you can tell when something's modular enough, and you can equally tell when it's not, which is why I think it's so important. The other thing is that a lot of the time you'll only realize and appreciate a lot of these issues when it's too late. So you'll build an app and then it grinds to a halt and it becomes hard to change things and things start breaking. Don't be afraid to tear it up and start over. The first app that I built on Bubble, I built it 3 times, because each time I got like 80% of the way and then just didn't work, and I realized all of the mistakes that I'd made. So I did it again. And then I also made mistakes, and then I did it again, and then it got to a standard that I was happy with. And that's okay. Don't feel like you have to get it right first time, but you have to be self-driven and encourage yourself to not just want to get it working, but get it working in the best way possible.
Yeah, definitely. Totally agree with you. When we see just the app preview, 2 different apps built by different developers, they might look the same, but in 10 seconds after seeing their editors, it's very easy to detect whose a senior or not developer between them, even if they look the same in the surface.
The other thing that I would say is avoid using templates religiously. There's two reasons for that. Firstly, in the template marketplace, most of them are built badly, and you'll find that you spend more time trying to repair them or tailor them for your use case than if you just built it from the start, and then you won't actually understand what's going on. Of course, tools like BuildPrint are trying to resolve that by helping you understand existing apps, but it's not a great idea. The other thing is I recommend to stay away from tools like Canvas by AirDev, and that's for a simple reason, which is that it feels like they try and consolidate a lot of logic into kind of reusable blocks in a way that suits them and templates each app, whereas that's not actually what every Bubble app needs. I get why they've done it, and I think they're a good company, but I don't think it's the best way to build Bubble apps. If you're going to use things like component libraries, I recommend something like No Code Fusion, where they're very atomic. Instead of pasting in a whole feature, you're getting nice looking inputs, for example, and can do it one by one. But if you don't build it from scratch and start pasting in all sorts of things from all over the place, it becomes kind of a mess, because you're not just pasting in the UI, you're pasting in the naming conventions, you're pasting in the workflows, you're pasting in a whole bunch of groups that you don't need but are in there because it's what this company which built this template needs. So I'd keep that in mind.
Yeah, I like to have my boilerplate, my personal boilerplate.
I think it's good to have your own one.
Yeah, because on this one, I know where everything is. I know how everything was structured, and it saves me tons of time when creating a new project. And since everything is based on styles, if I need to change a border radius for the inputs or the groups or a border call or anything, it's super easy, and everything stays cohesive.
And that's the other thing. I think it's a good exercise, even if you're not going to use it to build your own boilerplate, which includes sign up, maybe payments, plans.
Yeah, AI integrations. I didn't have time yet. I'm planning to do it this weekend to test the new Bubble streaming API feature especially for AI integrations. But for example, before this, we had to create loops to track API responses and thread statuses. And it's boring to build it. It's annoying to build it. The correct order of actions, the correct calls, recursive calls, and etc. So why not build it once in your boilerplate and then just reuse it afterwards? I mean, it makes no sense to not have in your boilerplate. And regarding security, George, maybe you're currently the best guy in the world to
know about that.
To share at least which are the most common cases of security issues that you've been seeing, and maybe the top 3 aspects that every developer should look at their projects.
I'll give you 3 things. The first of those is privacy rules. Privacy rules are the only thing which restrict data access in Bubble. And I mean the only thing. Users can access any data which their privacy rules permit them to access, no matter what kind of search constraints you have on the page. It's fairly easy to be able to just get a constraint and return all data from that table for data that I can access. There was a semi-viral thread today on X where people claimed there was a 0-day in Bubble because it allowed you to do this, but actually it's not, because all they found was that some apps don't have privacy rules, and they just describe what Bubble already documents. So privacy rules, no excuse, and the advice that I would have there is to set up privacy rules as soon as you create a data type. And the reason for that is twofold. One, because privacy rules have limitations, which mean your database needs to be structured in a certain way. So if you set up your privacy rules first, then you'll also know which fields you need. And that means that if you did it later, you would have to go back and change all of your logic to work with these new fields. The other reason I recommend adding them straight away is because if you try and add them later, you will encounter so many bugs that you cannot trace down, and it will be such a pain to debug. Just add them at the start, and it's a bit like building a house, because if the foundations are not secure, everything on top is going to be a disaster. But if you've got your privacy rules locked down, everything will be okay with your app security for data read, at least. The next thing I would say is workflow security. So on workflows, you might have buttons which are restricted, for example, only to admin users. You might have a single page app, and one of those pages is an admin page. What actually happens is Bubble will send all of the content for even invisible elements. So even invisible elements, the user can still see and can force to be visible. So if I have a single page app with an admin panel, I can force that to be visible. And then if there's a button which says, delete all users or send email to all users, I can click that. And because I assumed that only admins can see this reusable element, for example, it will just run because there's no condition on the workflow. But that doesn't work. So on any kind of workflow which needs security, you must have a condition like current user's role is admin, or search for user's subscription, check he has a subscription. And that's so important. Basically restrict workflows so that only users that are permitted to use them can use them. The last security bit I would give is backend workflows. Only make them public if they absolutely need to be public. It's going to change soon, I believe, so that they're not public by default, but currently they are public by default. It only needs to be public if you are receiving a webhook or calling it from the front end. The reason that it's problematic is because it's very easy for an attacker to call a backend workflow whenever they want. So when it's public, you might think if it requires authentication, then it's secure. But that's not quite right, because what authentication means is just verifying who I am. So I can manipulate the request so that I can call the backend workflow whenever I want. And as long as I authenticate myself by saying who I am, hey, I'm this user from the Bubble database, then I can run that workflow if there are no conditions on it. So it's really important that you have a condition on backend workflow events, especially when they're public, so that they can't be run whenever and however they like by malicious attackers.
Amazing. Yeah, I really hope that Bubble doesn't set API workflows as public endpoints by default, because it makes non-technical people lives very hard on this.
Well, it's also that most workflows don't need to be public, because most apps don't actually use webhooks at all. So
if you have 50 API workflows on your project, maybe 1, 2, or 3 need to be public.
Yeah.
Due to specific reasons.
But if they disable it, then maybe by muscle memory, we'll check it to make it public, even though it's not public.
Yeah, definitely. Awesome. Really, really good tips. And a lot of people ask me, George, how to get, that dilemma. I need portfolio to get clients, but I need clients to have a portfolio. I see your strategy. You shared some aspects of your strategy in your beginning, but if someone is already feeling prepared to start working, but has no client experience, has no real case portfolios, what are your calls on this? How would you help this developer?
It's a tricky problem. Getting the first one is always the hardest, and then it becomes easier, but it's not impossible. And I know that because on my own agency's website, we have no past work. We don't have any portfolio apps displayed. So obviously I'm doing something right. And you can do more than just have a portfolio. The first thing I would say is don't expect to be able to charge high rates first things. I think it's okay, and I would encourage to do reduced rate work as long as it gets you a good testimonial, gets you a good review from a client. It's not fair or reasonable to charge a client the same amount that a developer who's much more experienced would charge them. So you have to be realistic about that. But if you do discounted work, you're more likely to get a good review, which is then useful for being able to get future work. So it's basically like investing in your future self. Don't do it completely for free, and make sure you set strict boundaries for yourself for exactly how much you want to commit to it and for how much money. But that's where I'd start. The other thing is that portfolio is only part of it. When I get a lot of applications for the agency, and what I do is I look at their application answers, but I also look, do they have any presence on social media, on the Bubble forum? I particularly like hiring from the forum because I can see when people have their heads screwed on. So sometimes I'll see people on the forum and just spot them, and I'll message them saying, hey, do you want to apply for us? Do you want to work with us? And if you're good, people will spot that and clients will come to you. That's how a lot of clients come to us. It's through the forum saying, hey, you look reputable, so can you help us? And there's no reason that you can't do that as well. Of course, that doesn't mean spamming it. Make sure you're always adding value rather than trying to advertise yourself. If you're trying to add value without expecting anything in return, then good things will probably come in return. So,
yeah, I love it. I see not many people understand the power of being generous to the community.
Yeah, absolutely. Like when a client comes to us, they won't always be a good fit for us, whether that be because of the type of product or because of their budget. But when that happens, what we do is we always make sure that we point them in the direction of someone that we know does a good job. So we audit apps so we know who builds apps well and who doesn't. And I can point the client in the right direction. And they're grateful for that because they're happy. I'm happy because they don't pester me for more things. And they're also happy to recommend me to other people because we were honest about things with them. And that goes for all projects. So if a project's not right for Bubble, then you can tell a client that. Don't try and force them onto a platform that's not right for them, because that's disingenuous and not in their best interest. But by acting in their best interest and treating them how you would want to be treated, putting yourself in their position, they'll likely return the favor to you by speaking about you positively or referring you future work.
Definitely. It's intuitive when we are seen from the outside. I mean, when we as a forum visitor and we just go through the topics and the threads, and we see oftentimes similar names, the same users giving good answers and honest answers, as you said, not spamming or not bragging about themselves, but actually contributing, actually being generous with their times, because our time has value. So it doesn't matter how much you charge for your hour of development, if it's $10 or $200, but it has the value, and you're investing this value to the community, and it creates a positioning around yourself among the community. And this is very, very powerful. I don't know if it was intuitive at first for you, or if it was already as a strategy to be in the forum so constantly. How was this for you?
I came from a background with YouTube where I know how to get attention, because some of those videos have like tens of millions of views, and I know what works. And the main thing is that you have to catch people's attention and you have to be memorable. Hence, the agency's name is different. But the benefit of contributing, even if it's just so that only other Bubble developers hear about you, is that your name gets thrown around or links to your website, which also generates backlinks. So even if you contribute positive to the community, you'll get talked about a lot on social media. That's not particularly useful because clients won't read that. Future clients don't read that, only developers do. But there's a value to be had in general reputation. So MQ Secure, it's not free to run, right? It costs about $150 a month to run. But I've decided that the value that we get and the community gets by keeping that free is worth more than any money that we would make from it. It brings the agency into a good name. It gives back positively. It increases our reputation. And if I did monetize it, like, it wouldn't make that much, so it wouldn't be worth my time. That's the main thing that I would say. Don't be afraid of just doing things because they are good to do. And oftentimes that will be returned to you. And I don't just mean that in a philosophical sense. It happens, just not directly.
Cool. Awesome. Our listeners are mostly Brazilian developers or wannabe developers. I mean, people who are in our bubble world or no-code world. And if you were to give them one mission, I mean, for everybody who's watching us, something that they can start doing this week to grow as a professional no-code developer and stand out in our ecosystem, what would it be? Maybe, I don't know, a specific skill to practice, a project to tackle, or mindset to adopt? I don't know.
I
any
would
outcome.
I would say go back to doing things not just in the working way, but in the best way. You need to be able to challenge yourself and be independent. And that's especially true if you're a freelancer, because no one's going to be pushing you. When an app is delivered, the client has no way of knowing most of the time whether it's built well or not, but you do. And you need to be self-driven so that you can make it the best it can be, because you have a responsibility to deliver that for the client. And if you're not, then you're doing them a disservice. So every time you build, think, does this work? Yes. Is this the best way? Would I kick myself for doing it like this in 3 months' time? And that will always mean that you get better apps. You need to be constantly challenging yourself to always be trying to do better, find new ways to do things, because it will just make better apps.
Awesome. We're getting to the end of our episode. Just some quick final questions. If you didn't live in England, in which country would you like to live and work?
I lived in Hong Kong for a couple of years. So I was there for sixth form, end of high school. So I like that city, and also like Thailand, Philippines. It's good to me. It's cheap to live as well. So
Yeah.
so that's pretty nice place to work. But for now, I'm in the UK.
And probably a very different climate. I mean,
Absolutely.
weather.
But everywhere's air conditioned, so it's okay.
Yeah, definitely. Which bubble feature you secretly wish didn't exist? I mean,
Didn't exist.
yes.
I think drag and drop on the editor canvas is a bit silly, like where you can drag groups into other groups. I only drag and drop through the elements tree, and I think they spend a lot of time making sure drag and drop works. What do I wish didn't exist? No, besides workload units, I don't know.
Oh, yeah, I think W is all a good answer. I think nobody wanted them.
Yeah, that's what I'd go for.
Yeah, cool. And which most overhyped tech trend you're tired of hearing about?
Oh, well, that's a good one. I can actually think of a good answer to that. It's not vibe coding. It's not vibe coding that I have a problem with, but the idea that people can just create an app just by talking. Then it comes back to this thing that I said earlier, which is that English isn't a programming language. You still need to be switched on and thinking like an engineer. And I think that a lot of these AI assisted platforms, they are selling a bit of a lie, in the sense that what you say will come to life. But actually what you find with that is that we're very bad at describing what we want. And so it will do what you say, but you're just bad at articulating exactly what you want. So you'll basically become a technical product engineer, where you're managing kind of AIs maybe, but you still need to understand how everything it integrates together so that you can give good instructions.
Cool. And which soft skill you value the most for a no-code developer?
Oh, two things. First is, I would say, intellectual curiosity. And by that, I mean stuff like challenging yourself constantly, wanting to learn more, wanting to not just know enough, but know more than enough about how everything works, always wanting to do better. Second is communication. You need to be able to effectively communicate your ideas to clients who are often non-technical. So you can't just say, oh yeah, we should do this because this workflow X, Y, and Z. You need to actually just translate them into the information that they need to know so that you can handle the technical side. Give them pros and cons of certain decisions. Let yourself worry about the technical side, because some clients don't want to hear it. Of course, every client is different and you need to tailor your communication for different clients. Some clients want to understand the technical details, in which case you need to work with them on that. Some really need it to be simplified, and you should work with that. So you have to be flexible and adaptable.
Oh, I totally agree. I think communication is number one, especially because we are in the business sector, not exactly in the technology sector.
I'd say we're closer to consultants than software engineers.
Yes, we are building businesses, we're building solutions. So,
and on that, there's a third skill, which I'd say is important, and that's what I'd call commercial awareness. I mean, business sense. As a developer, if you don't have a product manager, you also need to understand the client's business very well. It's all well and good understanding their app, but you need to understand their business so that you can execute their ideas. And that's because, like I said earlier on AI-assisted coding, they're not always very good at articulating their ideas. You need to be able to read in between the lines, understand the problems they're trying to solve, and execute on that, so that you can build solutions in the most effective way, rather than just being an order taker and doing exactly what they say, because sometimes they won't even know what they want.
Definitely. Well, George, where people can find you, how can they get closer to you on social networks or anything?
You can follow me on X at George_NQU, and you can also find me on the forum. If you go to our website, you'll find a link to NQU Secure, which is the free security platform. And if you go to getbuildprints.com, then you'll be able to document your entire Bubble app in Portuguese for free and chat with your Bubble app also in Portuguese. So it should be a pretty valuable tool, but you can pretty much find me anyway.
Amazing. Thanks, George. I mean, you don't need to be this mythical unicorn to make things happen in no code, and you are proof for this. And as you've shown, being committed, being curious, being, hungry for making things happen is what builds the future, is actually what makes things happen. Some time ago, when we were talking about any other stuff, I don't remember what, I told you, I wish my son looks like you in the future. I mean, I'm
not ugly.
Yeah, at least work-wise. I mean, I'm a huge fan of yours, and I really admire your curiosity, your hunger.
Thank you, I appreciate that.
Your commitment. I remember back in BubbleCon, you were always worried about delivering what you had committed to your customers, to your projects, and you were always laser focused on what you had to do and what you had to deliver. And I really appreciate this kind of commitment. You know, I think this is what makes people different. And thanks for tuning in. Please.
Thank you for hosting and connecting the Brazilian community.
Yeah. I think it's going to be an interesting connection. And you'll probably see more Portuguese speaking followers on your socials after this, and sign-ups on your platforms after this. And, well, do you have any final message, any final thing that you'd like to share?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say don't feel discouraged if you find things hard at first. You're not going to be an expert after day one. I still don't know everything about Bubble. I do security research for Bubble, and I still don't know everything about Bubble. It's okay. You'll get there. It's being better than you were yesterday that's more important than being perfect today. So just focus on improving, and don't worry about pace. Don't compare yourself to the other people around you, and you'll get there. You'll get better, and you'll be able to find a lot of success as a developer.
Cool. Awesome. Yeah, this episode is going to be online in the next few days. I just need some time to translate the transcriptions.
Hopefully AI helps.
Portuguese, yeah, definitely AI will be very helpful. It's more the reviewing process and making sure everything looks fine. Follow George_NQU on X and all the social networks. Also check out BeFree Academy for more ways to grow your skills as a Bubble developer. This interchange between our Brazilian community and international community is just starting now. For this episode, please, if you're publishing anything, use the hashtag #BeFreeNotQuite so we can know that you're talking about this conversation. Thanks a lot. See you soon. Bye-bye.
I won't.